So we've previously talked about individual pages, and we've been constructing those individual pages. However, we want to be able to link between multiple pages, and this is an important skill. This is actually one of the things that was in the very first specification for the web, was the idea that we could create links, and they called it hyperlinks, and that name has kind of stuck. But we can create these links to other documents. The original thing was to publish scientific types of papers, and often you reference these papers at the bottom. And they said, well, what happens if we were linked to it? And then people could research things a lot easier instead of having to go out to their library and look that up. And so it became a way of sharing. This might be other useful information, etc. And so here we have a page. I want to create just a simple link. And a link in its most simple form is just the A tag. Okay, this is known as the anchor tag. Now, if I have just the A tag, this isn't going to do anything for me. And let me just kind of show you real quick what I mean by this. So I've got my anchor tag. I'm going to reload this. And you might notice that there is nothing that's showing up. Okay. So why is nothing showing up? Well, there is a couple of needed attributes, and the anchor tag actually has a couple of purposes. So let's show you the most common thing, which is linking to an external page. So to do that, I need the href attribute. Href is hyperlink reference or hyperreference, and so that's just short for that. So it's href, and then we have our file. You'll notice that Visual Studio Code is nice enough that says, oh, you're in a folder because you did that earlier. We set that up in a previous module. We're using a folder. And because we said use folder, it says, ooh, I know about these other files in that folder. And if I know about other files in that folder, I can create a link to it. And so I just have a simple file here that I'm using. And you notice I don't have to give, like a full web address. I just have to specify the file name. Now you'll notice that I have a little section that has a link here. By default, our links are underlined in blue. Okay, that's kind of what everyone expects. It doesn't have to be. We can change this with CSS, and we'll see that in the future. But by default, our links are underlined in blue. And if I click on it, it takes me to another file. This is just sample1.htm. Notice it doesn't have any real content. It doesn't have to. Okay. In fact, I can create a link to something that doesn't exist. It's called a broken link. Now, I'm not sure why I would do that intentionally. Okay, unless I'm trying to irritate my end users. But I can technically do it. There is nothing inside the web specification that actually goes out and checks like, oh, does this link actually exist? It assumes that you, the human, knew what you're doing. Now, this can cause some problems because we've all done this before. A web page moves, we had a link to it, and now it doesn't work anymore. We've seen it, okay? Maybe the website goes down. Maybe it's just too busy and it went down. We've seen examples of that occur in real life. So just because there's a link doesn't mean there's something on the other end to make it work. But we should test links, and we should work with the assumption in all reasonable expectations that that link is going to work. So let's look at some other things that we can do with links, okay? So the next thing we want to look at is an internal link, and this page isn't too big, so I'm going to go and we're going to create a new page that's going to be a little bit longer just so we can see what that's going to be like. So here I have 5 paragraphs. I'm going to do 15. Just because I can, okay? It's nice to have this bigger file so we can work with something and we can need to link inside of it. I'm going to paste all my information in here and do a save as. Okay, so you'll notice that this is quite large and I have some scrolling I'd have to do. This can be a problem. We don't want that. So how do we solve this problem? Well, internal linking is a common tool. And if you've seen the kind of push for some modern websites to be a single page website, this is what they do, is they just link down to a different section of web page. They might use some JavaScript to make it kind of scroll there. We're just going to do the simple HTML format, which allows you to do a jump. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to create a link here. I'm going to specify a href equals a little bit of copy and paste, section 1, section 2, section 3. Please realize that we could have done anything that we wanted to. So for section 1, I'm just going to put a pound sign. I'm going to show you what that does real quick. If I have my page, notice I see section 1, 2, and 3. If I click on section 1, notice that it jumped me to the top of my page. So if I have a link and I just put a pound sign, okay, nothing else, that jumps me to the top of my page. It's a little shortcut. Let's say I want to jump down a bit though. All right, so let's look at how we're going to create a second internal link that's not to the top of the page. I'm going to scroll down to where I want to add this link, put it right here. A lot of times we tend to link to near where a heading is because we're linking to a section on our web page. I'm going to create an anchor tag. And instead of using like the href attribute, I'm going to use the name attribute. Now my name attribute doesn't come up automatically by Visual Studio Code because this is a little bit of an older technique. I'll show you the current one, but I want you to know, like, if you look at an old web page and then you see this, what is it doing? Because it does still work. So I have name here, and I'm going to call this section 2. I'm going to close my anchor tag. Okay. Now, normally where I put my link text, we're going to leave that blank. Then up here, where I have my internal links, I'm going to say pound section 2. Okay, so that makes it nice and easy to find inside of Visual Studio Code. If I hover over this, you notice that I can follow this by doing control click. Visual Studio Code will take me to the page, but notice it doesn't drop me down in. Okay, I need to be in my browser for that. Let me reload that real quick. Go click on section 2. Notice it jumps me to that location. Notice that there's no information here, there's no text. This is an internal linking point. That's why it's called an anchor tag. It's an anchor that we can jump to. Now, the modern way of doing this is I'm going to come down to another h2 tag. But instead of creating an anchor tag and using the name attribute, I'm going to specify ID equals and then a value. Now, I'm going to call this S3. I could call it section 3. There's no specified or required naming scheme. It just has to kind of work for us. So I just call this S3 to keep it nice and simple. Anytime you have an ID attribute, the value for that ID attribute should be unique to that page. And one of the reasons why is if I had two IDs with the same value on the same page, and I wanted to create an internal link to them, how would I know where to go? Okay, the browser wouldn't know. Likewise, a lot of times we use IDs if we're going to use some sort of JavaScript to control elements on a page. If there was two elements on the page that had the same value, which one would it control? Would it control both? The first one, the last one? Who knows? And this is actually called, it's indeterminate. That means you might on one browser, it do the first one, and on the second browser, it do the last one. And so since you're not going to get a consistent result, it's best to ensure that if you have an ID, it is a unique for that page. So let's just jump up real quick. And I'm going to say hashmark S3. I'm going to click on section 3 now. It jumps me to that location. Now, if that location was down at the bottom and you couldn't scroll all the way there, it's not going to add blank space. It's just going to move you as far as it can until that content is visible. Okay, so it's never going to create content. It's not going to create empty spaces. It's going to jump you as far down as you can. So there are some limitations to my internal linking. but there's a lot of good uses. We typically see this on really long pages. A short page that barely fits on a screen, it serves no real purpose because it's not going to jump you further than the bottom of the screen that can be displayed. Okay? So that's your internal linking. That's internal to the page. Now you might notice that these are underlined, and if I hover over it, Visual Studio Code says, oh, follow the link if I control click. Well, if I do a control and click on it, notice that it loads the page for me, but it doesn't jump me down to its location. Okay, so it doesn't really work for internal linking. Where it works is if I have an external link that goes out to another page in my website. All right, so let's come down here. I have my template, and I want to do internal links for my site. So these are going to be linking not internally to this page, but to other pages on my website. You're typically going to find this in your header tag inside of a nav. And I have a nav tag here that was ready. Nav is just organizational. Once again, it's not going to change the way it displays unless we redo that by CSS. I'm going to create an anchor tag inside of my nav, href, and I'm going to just put a /. So if we have a /, it's going to go straight to our homepage for our website. Now, since we're not on a web server, we're just on a local computer, this means it would go, in my case, like to my C drive. Okay? If you're on Mac, it would go to your home drive. This isn't going to work for us. Okay? So this is just I'm showing you for when you'd be on a web server. If you want to do it on a local folder where you're just doing things locally and testing things out, you might want to do something a little bit different. What? Well, let me show you. Well, a lot of times I can do /, and this is going to be based upon a local file. Okay, so from where I am, this is called a relative link. From where I am, where can I jump to? Well, I'm going to jump to first.htm. And I'm going to put in my first page like that. However, if I think about site-wide links, things that are up inside my header, do I see a lot of links that have a lot of text involved in them? No, you don't. Okay? The information inside of my open anchor tag and my close anchor tag, that's called my link text. And inside of a web page, it's not uncommon for that to be multiple words. And in fact, we want that to be kind of descriptive. But up in our header, where we have our site-wide navigation, you typically are only going to have one or maybe two words. Now, the // is optional. If you don't have it, it's also relative to your location. You can also have an absolute link. If you say /, the / says go to the root of my web server and then go to this file. And so this can actually have subfolders and folders within it, and this is an absolute path. Now, the difference between a relative and absolute for a small website is minimal. If you don't have subfolders and things like that, it doesn't matter. Okay? If you're on a bigger site, though, it really starts to matter. How much so? Well, think about it this way. If I ask you how to get to the store, and you give me directions from where you are, but we're on the phone and I'm in a different spot, will I get to the store? No. You're saying based on from where you are. You're saying, hey, go down the street, make a right after 2 blocks, go to the stoplight, make a left, cross the intersection, there's your store. But I might be in a completely different location, and I can't do those directions. Or I could do those directions and it's not going to take me to the same spot. So if you are with the person and they say, hey, okay, go down this street, go about 2 blocks, make a left, go into the stoplight, you can follow those directions. It's relative, but it's based on where you are, so that's okay. if you're in two different locations, okay, you're on the phone, you're texting someone, you want to know, okay, assume this is the starting point. That's what that / does. ./ says from where I am. Just the / says start at the beginning of my server. Start from this location and go to where we have. That's more likely to be accurate. Now, once again, if you're on a simple website, doesn't have multiple subfolders and things like that, doesn't matter. You just have to kind of keep track of how it is working for you. Now, most of the time, your site navigation is only going to be a few links. I've seen as few as 2, up to about 6, 7, 8. After that, it starts to get too big. It's not going to fit across the screen. Now, some sites will do sublinks, and you can have, category, and then underneath it you have sublinks, little flyout menus. We're not going to get involved with that. That tends to incorporate CSS and JavaScript and stuff like that. That's outside of our scope for right now and what we can do. So we have here 3 links. Let's look at one more, and that is, how do we link externally? If I want to link externally, a lot of times I need to provide that full address. Okay, I can't say, oh, go to this file. I need to specify the web server and the file. So I might say something like https google.com. I have to reference the whole thing. HTTP or HTTPS is not technically required. I could just do the //, but generally good form is to have the complete web address. And the complete web address is going to include the protocol that you need to use to get there. That's that HTTPS. The : / lets us know, okay, that's the protocol. That's where we're good for. Google.com. Okay, that's a fully qualified domain name. If there's something before that, sometimes you'll see domains. Or mail. Or something like that. That's a subdomain. That's used for internal routing within their system. It may be on the same server. It may be on a different server. For some place like Google, trust me, they have collections of servers. And so it's a whole different collection. Then you have, after your last / for the domain name, like .com, .net, .edu, etc., you're going to have other values that can be subfolders or a file or something else like that. In this case, we're just going to google.com, the main homepage for their site. That's an external site. Now, a lot of times external sites we want to open up into a brand new window. So what we can do is we can specify, for example, target. That's an attribute that has a couple of default values. One is _blank. This is a built-in value that I can use. When I do that, it's going to open up in a new tab. Older browsers would open up in a whole new window. Now we open up in a new tab. So if I go to template, you can kind of see the links here. Click on it, notice it goes to a whole new tab. Now, we talked about how by default our links are blue and underlined, and that works great inside of our body of our text, but notice here it's really, really hard to see. So quite often our links are going to display differently inside of a nav. So let's go to our CSS page and see how we can make changes. A lot of times we're going to put this up in our header rules or right after our header rules because it's inside the header. So I might create a little section here. Header, nav, anchor tag. Okay, so this is a kind of common way of doing something like that. Font size, I'm going to make it just a little bigger. Font weight, I tend to make this bold just so it stands out. Navigation links need to stand out. I'll specify the color as white. Now when I reload, you'll see that, oh, okay, it's standing out. I can see this. This is bigger. I like this. Being white, it's definitely a lot easier to see. Now, one thing you might notice is that it's still underlined. A lot of times, we don't underline main navigation. In fact, we tend to make them look like they're in little buttons. So let's see how we're going to do that real quick. That's kind of easy. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say text decoration. And my decoration allows me to have lines through it, lines under it, just a kind of variety of different things. I'm going to choose none. So I don't want any text decoration. When I come back here and reload, you'll notice that, okay, this is more along the lines of what I expect. I'm going to tend to want a little bit bigger area so I have a place to click on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my padding. I'm going to add just 5 pixels, just so that way if I don't exactly click on it, I'm more likely to get it. I'm also not going to add margin top and bottom, but a little bit to my left and right. Typically, I'm only going to do one side, so I'll do 10 pixels to my right and none on my bottom or my left. This way I have kind of a consistent spacing across it without causing that first element to be kind of pushed in. So notice my first element's not pushed in, but now I see my spacing here. I can see where those are. Now I may choose to make this as a button. Okay, so that's an option. And I can use a background color for that. So I'll say background color and we'll do black. Just so it stands out a little bit. I'm also going to do a border radius. Now we saw a border radius earlier where we had a border, but the border radius, even if we don't have a border, still will work. Just do 5 pixels. It's a subtle thing, and you can kind of see that there. Okay. Now you might be going, okay, do I want more border radius? Do I want more padding? That's totally up to you. We could do a lot more. If we do 50%, you'll notice that it's going to completely round them. And you might go, oh, okay, that's too much. I don't want that. Okay, you might go, oh, that's exactly what I want. Totally up to you. Notice if you do something like 15 pixels, that it might start to cut in a little bit on your text. So you might need to have a little bit more padding. So you might do 5 pixels top and bottom and 10 pixels left and right. That gives you a little more space. Make sure your rounding doesn't cut into your text. Real simple things like that. This is known as kind of a pill style because it looks like little medicine pills. That's falling a little bit out of favor. There's other ways of doing it. You can always kind of control a lot of your design style and keep things up to date as things change. There still is a lot of use in this style. So you really have to kind of make those decisions. You know, okay, how do I want to do this? And always focus on usability. Is this usable? Yes or no? So one thing this does not do, however, is if I try to roll over it, I can see the little finger and how it changes that cursor, but it doesn't give me a good visual indication. So I'm going to come down here and create a new rule. Header, nav, I'm going to say : hover. This is known as a pseudo class. This is technically for any HTML document, but it says when I put my mouse cursor over this link, in this particular case, what do I want to change? Now, things I want to change are things that are not going to change the size. So I don't want to change my padding, my margin, my font size, my font weight. I don't want to change anything that's going to change the size of my content. I don't want to change things like, is it italicized or not? Because that's going to change my size, believe it or not. Okay, just like making it bold or unbold. So I typically want to focus on things like color because that doesn't change my size. Any rule that I had from before is still going to work, only if there's something new, because I added a pseudo class. It's more specific it's going to overwrite it, but only when I'm hovering over it, because that's the only time the sudo class is active. All right, so I'm going to change my background color to be white, and then my foreground color to be black. And so all I did is just switch those two. So if I reload this and hover over it, notice it's a real simple effect, but it's very easy to read. This obviously doesn't work if I'm using like a cell phone, okay? I can't hover over things with my finger. But if I'm using it on a desktop environment, this works perfectly. So it's all about knowing how is my website going to be used. If it's going to be used on a desktop, whether it's a laptop or desktop, anything like that, this is a good tool. It's just making it more obvious. Anything you can do that makes your website obvious to your user and how to use it, the better it is. You don't want them calling up going, hey, how do I use your website? Okay, make it obvious for them. Okay, so now we have this list. We have the compound selectors. We have the selector specificity. We saw how we can use a pseudo selector to help it. We've got our navigation set. And we might think, okay, we're done. Well, we made these changes inside of our template, but the question is, did they change in our other pages? The pages that we based off this template? Well, the answer is going to be, unfortunately, no. If I come here to sample 2, you notice that my nav is empty. So what that means is I want to build out my template and be as complete as possible because it's not going to update with me. So when you're building your template, get it as close to ready so you don't have to make changes. The good news is making changes is very easy. I'm going to come up here and select my nav from my template. In my sample 2, I'm just going to replace my nav. So let's go back here now and pick sample 2. So notice that because I had that external style sheet, and that's where my styles were, that page automatically picked up those changes. All I had to do was update those nav links. So was it a big deal? No, not really. That's the advantage of using the external style sheet. We just have to update the content inside our header. That's all we had to do, and you can see that effect there. So make sure you get your template as close to done as you can. That way you don't have to make many changes. Use the external style sheet, and your life will be much, much simpler. In our next set of modules, we'll be looking at how do we add additional content and new types of content. So be looking for that.